This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster. And this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. And it's our last one of the year of 2024.
Wow.
It's a lot. We've done a lot of podcasting.
That's true. Almost every week we've put out a podcast or a supplemental, I think. And even though we didn't have episodes to review, obviously, every week, but we got a lot of interviews this year.
Yeah. We got some great, besides the highlight of our 200th episode being Jonathan Frakes, which is always a treat. We had some new folks this year, like the songwriters from Subspace Rhapsody.
Yes, I knew that was going to be your favorite. No, they wwere great. It was an interesting interview, but I knew that was
on my list of highlights of the year for sure.
A highlight for me was Robert Hewitt Wolf. I like taking a deep dive. That's probably a model for something I'd like to see us do more next year is, the 38th anniversary of whatever episode, bring back a writer, producer, someone, director to talk about, an old episode of TNG or DS9 or Voyager or Enterprise.
That's my favorite thing. I love doing that. And I couldn't believe we got Robert Hewitt Wolf, that you just asked him and he said yes. And then there we were talking to him. Like, it was a very exciting day.
Right. And it was a very special day. It was the real day.
Yes.
And then, and we had Lawrence Luckinbill.
Which is crazy. It's crazy that I still remember when his wife, Lucy Arnaz, leaned in to help him with the tech. And I was like, oh my God, it's Lucy's daughter. So that was sort of crazy.
A brush with greatness.
Yes.
This is our Christmas. We're taking Christmas off, kind of. We're not going to do news this week. We have already recorded. It's Gates McFadden because this is the third season of our new podcast. Well, not new, I guess.
I was going to say, it's hard to be the third season of a new podcast.
Yeah. And we had a lovely chat. So let's take a listen. Once again, we'd like to welcome back one of our favorite co-podcasters, Gates McFadden, who happens to have been on a TV show, I think. But really, we're here to talk to her about InvestiGates, Who Do You Think You Are? Season 3.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you guys again and hear you guys.
Yeah, nice to see. Well, we don't see you, but we do hear you. So the thing, InvestiGates is a Star Trek podcast and it isn't a Star Trek podcast. So how do you see it?
I see it as the only real connection with Star Trek is that they happen to be actors in Star Trek. That which is amazing because they're so interesting. And to have that many, well, first of all, to have such a huge franchise that's so wonderful and reaches so many people in so many different iterations, that's pretty cool. And then to see that the people that I spoke to in season 3, for example, are really terrific. And that was my request when Brian Vogt-Weiss from Nacelle asked me to do the podcast. I said, well, I have no interest in doing a Star Trek per se podcast because so many people are doing wonderful podcasts about Star Trek. I believe fans and other hosts and people like yourself have done really remarkable jobs talking about the issues in Star Trek and the episodes and things like that. So I didn't want to try to compete with that. I wanted to let those people who have been working so hard for many years be successful at it, right? I'm interested in people and having conversations about subjects that interest me. I'm always interested and intrigued by where somebody comes from, what their family situation was like growing up, how they feel about, education, how have they traveled, all that sort of thing. I find that interesting. I don't care if I'm standing in line at the grocery store. If someone starts a conversation, that can be very fun to find out about people.
Now, you, I believe, almost exclusively, and you said actors. Is there a reason why you are, because you're an actor, or that you don't bring in people, directors or writers and stuff like that, more because there's a larger pantheon of people who worked on the show that you worked with.
Although you did have Michael Westmore, right?
I did have Michael Westmore, and I also had Barry Metalis.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he was a producer, and I want to have the producer of Lower Decks as well. He's been interested. Oh no, there's many people. I would love to have it be a broader reach. It's just that I've begun with the actors, and if it keeps going, I certainly would like to expand my reach. But it's always amazing how specific we all are. We all have these stories that have something in common, but we also have these very different takes on things. And I love that.
So how did you specifically pick the people that you spoke to this season?
Well, I always want to have, I don't want to just do one show. I did that in the beginning because it was my cast. Okay. And actually I found it much more difficult because I knew them too well. I didn't want to just, I knew also what they didn't want to talk about, what they would not share publicly. Okay. So then it becomes really interesting because obviously I know that the things that I might normally ask, if I didn't know them so well, I wasn't going to ask those things because I knew them and they wouldn't have wanted to discuss that. But I think I've learned in this last season, it was much more natural. I just really found people from different shows. And not everyone was available. There were a lot of times I would try to get certain people and they'd be shooting. And my schedule didn't work with theirs. So that's part of it. And I love having people in the studio. That's always the way I try it first. I had both Sonequa and Jess Bush and Doug Jones at the studio, and Connor. And I think it's like if I was sitting right there, it just adds a little something when you're right there in person. So that's part of why I don't have just anybody, because I have to make sure that they're available. And then if not, then I have to figure out the Zoom and where are they? Are they in England? Are they here? Are they in Canada? So it's just things like that. But I have many people who I've spoken with and they know I'm interested in them. And I've had people ask me if they can be on the podcast. So that's a wonderful thing. And it's just, I try to do a balance, but it depends on who's available, things like that.
Well, I noticed that this season has an emphasis. Connor obviously was from Enterprise, but everyone else is from what we'd call the new shows, right? So you had people from Discovery and Picard and Strange New Worlds. Was that was that just by happenstance? Because there is an interesting dynamic between actors today or on the new shows versus the way things were like back in the 90s.
Very definitely. I think I specifically wanted to have people from those new shows just because, well, Discovery was not going to be happening. And then Lower Decks, I wanted people from because, well, Lower Decks, I just thought was so brilliant. That's why I wanted to, right when I started the next season, I wanted to get people like Tawny on. I thought it was so clever. But I feel I wanted to spread it out with the shows. And that's why specifically I wanted Connor or, I wanted somebody who was going to be from Enterprise. And I will continue to want to do that. I also would love to go back and talk to more people from DS9 and Voyager. Of course, that would be really interesting. It's more, I take some effort to have a diversity of the shows. I take some effort in trying to have men and women sort of equal, but it just depends on many factors. I think in the beginning, I would go long on some of the shows, and so I would end up having 2 episodes because I had so much material. I've learned that just gives, it's better if I can just make it tighter and get to the questions I really want to ask, so I don't have to do as much editing, because the editing took me so much time before.
I will say I did enjoy all your 2-parters.
Did you? I'm glad to hear that. I thought Will Wheaton's was pretty amazing, and I thought Nana's, obviously that was amazing in a whole other way.
Yeah, Nana's was very intense.
Yeah. Well, it was me being really honest, and she was being very, very kind. to believe me when I said, I had this reaction. And she's like, yeah, but you knew about this. And I said, yes, I know. But it's like bizarre. I literally had a physical reaction, was shaking in the car going home. So I felt that was something that I could discuss with her because it might have some impact with other people.
I had a physical reaction listening to it as well.
Yeah. And there was something about the first time it didn't, either I had blocked it or it didn't hear, I didn't hear it as much, but I felt it's like, it's like Al-Anon or something. There's people who have to even hear something, or we're all in the same room and we do care about things and we care about her. So it's very upsetting to hear what happened to her, or anyone it would be, but particularly when it's someone you know. And she was terrific about being present and being there and answering the questions. So bravo to her. She was quite amazing. But I also thought Will's was amazing because he was a challenge for me. He was so used to being sort of like the dungeon master and the tabletop host, like running the show. And that's why I came up with that game of making him put a penny in if he forgot to ask me a question. And I was really happy how it turned out. It was great.
Yeah. How do you, because you're either talking to someone you know very well, like Will, and then with sort of these new people or people who are on all other shows. So how is your approach different when it's someone you know very well versus someone you don't?
I think it's much harder when it's somebody I know very well. That's for me. I think it's, it's not like we're both of us interviewing somebody, like we're not both the hosts interviewing somebody. That would be easier because we could have fun. We could have inside jokes. But when it's all of the new people have been extremely open with me, I feel. And we've laughed and we've had a really good connection. And I've been very, very pleased with that. So I find it easier. Now, it could be that because it's a new show, it hasn't been on for 7 years. I don't know. But there's something to me with people who I don't know as well. I find it easier. I don't know if that's true with you. How do you feel?
I think it's easier with people I do know. How about you, Tony?
Yeah. Because you're more comfortable and you feel like, to be honest, like there's questions I wouldn't ask you, but like if I had someone like Terry Metalis on, who I know pretty well, I know I could push him. I know how far I could push him, and so whereas I kind of, I don't know where the line is, and I'm also curious like about how I edit the podcast. You were talking about editing. And I'm curious what your approach to in editing is. Like on a typical podcast, how much are you cutting out? Like 1%, just kind of the flubs or awkward moments, or when people get that? Because you've had some moments, I'm thinking of Anson Mount, but where you leave stuff in, and so I'm curious how you approach to editing. And I'm still shocked you do it, to be perfectly honest.
Well, now I have honed my skills, so I just can do it. I don't literally have to do it technically now. I have somebody this season who works with me, and I did it by pencil. Like I would have a transcript and I would edit. If there was anything I needed, I said, I want to hear that. Then she would let me. But it was relatively simple this whole season because I approached it differently. The way I prepared my questions, and the way I sort of forced myself to do it in a shorter amount of time. I think I went into doing this in a way where I was either worried I was going to take too long or worried I wasn't going to get enough material. And I think I've developed a little more confidence as a host. I hope I have. And I think it's not as difficult. So in the beginning, I had so much material. So much material that it was like, I could do, 5 episodes here. So then I would pick what I thought were the most interesting stories. Right. And I spend a lot of time getting rid of my stories because sometimes I say the same story because that person doesn't know me, hasn't heard that story. Okay. Right. So if anything, I try to get rid of my stories, because I'm trying to share my life with them. If I want them to be vulnerable and open, I need to be vulnerable and open. That's my philosophy. I'm not an investigative reporter. I'm not trying to trip them up. I'm not trying to in any way make them uncomfortable. I want to have them be themselves, and I want to show them in the best possible light, because they're very wonderful people. So that's kind of the difference. So it was much more streamlined this season, because I just had learned enough to be better at it. In the first time doing all of the edits through, what did I use? Which program? I can't remember, but it was complicated. And I could not, like I was doing wills and I had spent hours and hours and hours on it. And then I lost the whole thing. And, yeah. I mean, so, I've learned through my mistakes, and then I had to start all over from the beginning. But see, in a way, I learned a new skill. I learned how to do something that I didn't think I would be interested in doing. And by the third season now, I'm really enjoying it. So who knew, right?
That's great. I was listening to you talking to David Ajala, and you were talking about something I definitely sympathize with, which is how hard it is to hear your own voice. Yeah. And he talked about how you have to learn to love it. So have you been able to do that?
Well, I'm working on it. It's tricky, because what's funny is, now this is amusing. So in that first season, I would announce people, and I'd use my best voice when I'd be speaking. And I would announce them, and I would articulate, and I would make sure that I did it. And I'd be mellifluous with my, and I think it was Brent who said, "What the heck are you doing that phony voice for? Why don't you just talk like normally?" Because it's fine in the podcast. But see, to me, the way I would listen to myself in that podcast was me nervous, running on, and just completely oblivious to how I sounded. So I'm trying to find a way where if I'm more relaxed, I think the voice is just better naturally. I don't know if you find that, but sometimes I felt I was like this.
Are you one of those actors, like I know Shatner's this way, where you just don't like to look at yourself, like your own work?
Oh yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal, but the voice is always a shock. I don't think I'd ever done anything other than when you do voiceovers, I'm very aware it's a performance. Okay. And that's different. That I calibrate the voice. I try to do the vowels and all of that sort of thing in the right way, because I have a Midwest accent. But when I'm doing the podcast, I'm engaged in the questions and the answers and listening. So I'm not thinking about my voice. And so it was a bit of a shock. And it still is, I'm sure. Thank God I don't have to hear myself on the radio singing every day. I don't know how people do it.
Do you have like deep in your career? Do you have like starting out where you had to do like coffee commercials and voiceovers and that? Is it?
Oh yeah.
Anything like what's the most like embarrassing or weird, commercial thing that you ever had to do? Perhaps from the.
Well, I had one where, I really, they were so mad at me. Because I finally called my agent and said, I want out. It was supposed to be that you have a headache, a sinus headache. And so they show you really awful, and then you feel good again and you suddenly look beautiful. But the guy was on coke and was going every 10 minutes into the bathroom, the director. And I was like, he was just opening bottles of champagne and doing stuff. And I'm like, I am out of here. And it was for a fair amount of money. So my agents were not happy, but I was like, sorry, I did not, this could take 3 days, the rate we're going. But that was one of the weirdest ones, because there was a whole period where I'm taped up so that you look, like you're feeling badly and everything. And then he'd go in the bathroom and then come out lit, it was just crazy. But But now I loved my Sarah Le Croissant one because I got to do the French accent. They kept telling me I had been in France and could speak fluent French, and they kept saying, "No, you've got to make it sound more American. You're French." And I'm like, "Well, I thought she was supposed to be French." So my French, I mean, I can't win. My French friends think I sound ridiculously American, and my American friends thought, "Oh, you spoke French so well," but or you spoke, the accent was so authentic, and I didn't really do well on either end, but it was a compromise.
Nice.
They want that fake French accent.
They wanted the French. They kept saying, "We don't understand you." And I'm like, "Well, that's the way my French speak English."
Right.
Thank God you didn't have Patrick do that, because didn't you do one audition with the French accent, I think?
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Well, the funny thing about all of those Brit actors, the RSC actors, I've known several of them who are in his age range. And they all almost every single one came from places where they spoke with horrible, actually people find them charming. I like the accents that are authentic from their region. And the new actors use those accents. And then when they're supposed to play upper class, they put on the upper class. But Cecily Berry, at that time, they were telling everyone, never drop your accent. So it would be like, if you came from a place and you were always talking like this, and then all of a sudden you go to theater school and now you're speaking like this, you must never, ever go back. Even when you go home to see mama and dada, never change the way you're speaking. Act like you're just smarter than all of us because you have this enunciation. So I don't know. I sort of, the new Brit actors don't do that, but the older ones definitely did. And when their own accents would sort of shine through, I loved it, but they would always cover it up. I find that so interesting because you're sort of pretending to be, I don't know, whatever. It's a thing.
Are you saying that there's a hard Yorkshire accent underneath the Patrick Stewart we all know and love?
Yes, dear.
I think I heard him do it on Conan.
Well, he'll do it like that, but he won't. But they won't let it slip because in their generation, when they went to drama school, that's what they were told. Don't ever let it slip. And listen, we Americans just salivate all over them because of that enunciation and articulation, and it's like as if. I don't know what, but it's all learned behavior from almost all of them. Some of them, I'm sure, went to Oxford and grew up with that group of folks who spoke. It's not the Queen's English. It's a very theatrical English. It's beautiful. It is very beautiful. I also like I like. The Beatles accent. I like all the accents. It's fun.
Well, speaking of people with British accents, do you think you'll get Patrick Stewart on your podcast next season?
I don't know. I mean, he's never been around the area when or available. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Plus, he wrote his book. So
yes.
He got his whole book about his childhood. I mean, otherwise... that was the one possibility that he could be on. And then he was doing his book tour. And I thought, well, what am I going to ask him that's not in the book? Right.
We are presuming there's going to be a season 4. Have you said anything about that? Is that you think that's...
I'm waiting to hear. I think they're quite pleased, but I'm waiting to hear.
You did. I know you're up on all the new shows and you've talked about how you like them. There's a new one coming.
I know.
Are you excited about that? What do you think about that? And have you already been thinking, I need to get Paul Giamatti?
Holly Hunter.
Yeah.
Well, I think one step at a time. One step at a time. Of course, that would be really fun. That would be amazing. But I can only say that so far, I haven't been disappointed with any of the shows. So why should I think I'm going to be, right? I'm just sorry that Lower Decks was pulled because I thought that was so funny. And I really thought it was just the perfect moment to have a show like that. It could have run forever. But at any rate, I think the shows will probably be wonderful. And the new movie. I mean, wouldn't it be great to talk to Michelle Yeoh? I mean, what a woman. But we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Have you been enjoying it, I hope?
Yeah.
I mean, Lower Decks is a huge favorite of everybody's, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just watched the series finale. So this podcast will come out after that, so it won't be a spoiler. And it's tearjerker. It's amazing. I'm really sad now because it's over.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful finale.
Oh, well, I wouldn't have expected anything less. Yeah, they're really remarkable people, and Mike is really an amazing writer-producer. They love him. They just love him. Which is quite a good sign.
Agree.
Yeah.
So we do have, some new shows coming, and obviously people were talking so much about Legacy, that Terry Matalas produced kind of show. Do you think there's still a chance for anything like that would involve you and your next gen pals?
I don't think so, to be honest. I think that ship has sailed, sadly. I think it's too bad. I think it really was crazy. When I saw the set of the spaceship set being just destroyed, I thought, my God, they're not saving it? It was so remarkable. They could have used it. But, the studios don't really care about my opinion on that. So I don't think it's going to happen, no. But never say never in Star Trek. That's for sure.
Yeah, we certainly could not have anticipated what we got. So if they did do something else, have you thought about what you'd like to see Beverly doing?
No, I don't. I don't spend my time thinking about that. I wait until something actually might be possible, and then I think about it.
Yeah.
But she's a character that really had a chance to grow in Picard season 3, which was terrific. That was a wonderful gift to have a more rounded character, more developed character. So I liked that very much. And I just played Dungeons and Dragons with Ed Spilker. He was poor guy was up all night playing it. We were trying to raise money for charity with Todd.
Right.
It was great. It was really great. Nansen was there, and I had never played, and I was the idiot on the Zoom, but they were very patient with me. But we raised some money, which was great.
Yeah, Bonnie Gordon said she was helping you, teaching you some D&D stuff.
She came over. I begged her to, because she's such a lovely person. And she let me borrow some dice, which I just did not study enough. My biggest flaw was I could not remember which dice to use. And I'd be rolling something. I'd say, okay, I have a 16. And Todd would go, no, that dice doesn't have 16. And I'd go, okay, how many sides does it have? Anyway.
I'm going to bring up kind of some sad news, but I'm curious your perspective on something that recently Jerry Taylor passed away. And
I didn't know that, actually.
Oh,
really? Oh,
no.
That was about a month ago.
I did not know that.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to break the news to you.
Wow.
So Jerry, she joined TNG in season 5, I think, and she was showrunner by 6 or 7.
Yep.
And I think she was the first one, certainly the most senior woman, if not the first woman on staff writing. And I'm curious, what was that like for you when you're like, oh, they brought in a woman to actually write these characters? And did you feel a difference? Did you ever have a chance to talk to her? And, do you have any memories of, Jerry's influence?
She was a lovely person. I mean, she's the one responsible for Sub Rosa.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't forget about that. But
never.
Which was a stunning. I was like, what? I thought she was out of her mind when I read that, but she said, but I wanted you to have a romantic episode. So, she was so lovely to think about that, to say, no, I want to show you the other side of her character. So now it's a fan. There's a whole group of fans who that's one of their favorites. It's like a cult classic. It's not very Star Trek, let's be honest, but it's a good laugh.
It gets a callback in the series finale of Lower Decks, by the way. There's a brief ghost candle moment in the series finale.
God bless. Oh, I love Mike for doing that. It's so funny. I mean, I do. I think it's so important to be able to laugh at something, even if we also treasure it. We've just got to do all that. Jerry was lovely. By that time, I had my baby or was pregnant. And so I had my hands full just between working and being a mom and all of that sort of stuff. So I didn't have as much of hangout time with her because it's a huge job. I don't think I understood how difficult being a producer of any TV show was. I really think I was just not aware at the Augean task. I mean, it's a Herculean task to run a TV show, to be the producer or the line producer, the one who's writing. Unbelievable. So we would have little chats, but we didn't have any, like, this is where I want my character to go and this sort of thing. No, we didn't do that much because I had sort of given up a bit with that, to be honest with you. I felt most of my ideas were falling on deaf ears. So I just kind of, whatever showed up is what showed up. And I would discuss a scene if I had a problem. But by then it was very clear I was not going to be, there was not going to be something more between Picard and Crusher and several other things. So, I still got some very good episodes, but it was not something I got involved in. Whereas with Terry Metalis, he wanted to know everything I wanted to think, everything I would give him as input, he would listen to. So that was very different.
I want to bring up, I know you had a great talk with Nana for her book. And have you had a chance to read her book yet?
No, it's a huge book. I mean, I've read excerpts which are fantastic, but no, I haven't. But I certainly want to. I'm very impressed with her efforts.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I think you're going to love it.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, it's amazing. It's incredible to have done something like that, truly. So, yeah.
Yeah, especially given that she shifted what it was supposed to be about.
Yeah.
Into something much deeper.
Exactly. Oh, well, I mean, again, I've been impressed with the parts that I have read, but I have not, read all of it. What stands out the most to you?
Honestly, your interview and Kate's were really strong. And Nana describing her own experiences was really strong. And I felt like what I told her when I talked to her about it was that it made me want to start, this is going to sound funny, like old consciousness raising groups from the 70s. Yeah. Like when I was reading the book, it was just prompting 1,000 thoughts about my own life and being a woman, as well as the stories I was reading, which I think was her goal.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked to her about some of the, I know TNG had its ups and downs for you, and that you were gone for a season. Was coming back a difficult decision for you?
Yeah, it was. And I felt I was misled, but it's like, that's the way it goes. It's a tough business and you have to, I thought it was going to be exactly the character I'd had before, and it wasn't. And they had a lot of scripts that were Pulaski scripts. And so, but you know what? It's water under the bridge. I really, I don't spend my nights thinking about this, and I don't angst over it. Star Trek has been so good, such a gift in my life, and it does keep giving. So I really, that's where I'm putting my focus these days.
And it sounds like it's going to continue giving with more InvestiGates.
I hope so. Wouldn't that be great? I hope so.
And we did love seeing Wesley and Beverly together on Prodigy.
Oh, I did too. Wasn't that sweet? I loved the way they wrote that scene. Really nice. Yeah.
Much needed.
We had a nice chat with Will about that. So it's only too bad that, you guys recorded separately and stuff, but it's still nice that it happened.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was really great. And we've really been enjoying your podcast. Very unusual conversations I love the Sonequa one, just blew me away.
Oh, she's amazing. I mean, the people are amazing. They're the ones. It's really, really interesting to hear their stories. Well, lots of love to you and have a great holiday season, okay?
You too.
You too.
Okay, take care.
Well, that was our last interview of the year and an excellent one. Even though we did have technical problems when we were supposed to be able to see her and we couldn't, and she did her hair for us. We finally, at the very end, her video started working.
And she looked great.
She looked fabulous. I just want everyone to know. So, and I did dig up the Sara Lee Croissant commercial she talked about. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes so you can watch her do her French accent.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I love talking to Gates because she's quite honest about stuff, not just, her podcast is a very frank podcast, but, we did talk a little Star Trek there as well. And, but I like how she's like, she doesn't, there's certain things we could get into and, she's like, I don't want to, it's like, it's water under the bridge, a lot of this stuff, season 2 stuff and all that.
And not only did it happen, obviously, like a very long time ago, but she looks at all the wonderful things she's gotten from Star Trek, and that's the view she'd rather have, which I totally get. Like she's honest, and she'll tell you the truth about what she thought at the time, but it's not something she wants to dwell on because she's like, look at all the great stuff.
Yeah, and I'm just, I'm thankful that we got to see her again in season 3 of Picard.
And Prodigy, sorta. We saw her.
Yes.
We needed her and Wesley to be back together, so that was nice.
Indeed. All right. Well, Merry Christmas. This podcast comes out a couple days after Christmas.
And Happy Hanukkah, which will be in full swing.
And early Happy New Year.
And we'll see you in 2025.
Wow. Bye.
Bye.